Okay, test 2, section 3, questions 21 to 30. Woolly mammoths on South Pole's Island. Listen to the audio. Section, where is this? In 3, right? Okay. That's 2, section 3.
Section 3. You will hear two environmental science students called Rosie and Martin discussing their presentation on an extinct animal called the woolly mammoth with their tutor. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24.
Alright, now we can just listen one by one, okay? To practice.
So, Rosie and Martin.
Nhi. Yeah, so Rosie and Martin.
Let's look at what you've got for your presentation.
Let's look at what you got for your presentation.
On woolly mammoths.
On woolly mammoths. Cố gắng luyện nhiều lên nha.
Okay, we've got a short outline here.
Okay, we've got a short outline here.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So, it's about a research project in North America.
So it's about research project in North America. So you can only listen to around 20 to 30%. So that's not enough, okay? You need to practice listening more. Rồi, mới nghe được khoảng 20 đến 30% thôi ha, chưa đủ nha. Công lực vẫn còn yếu lắm. Luyện nghe nhiều lên. Rồi, TOEIC.
Yes, but we thought we needed something general about woolly mammoths.
Yes, but we thought we need something general about woolly mammoths.
In our introduction.
In our introduction.
To establish that they were related to our modern elephant.
To establish that they were related to our modern elephant.
And they lived thousands of years ago.
Yeah, and they lived thousands of years ago.
In the last ice age.
In the last ice age. Ice age. In the last ice age. Okay? So this say in the last ice age. Alright, Ngọc Anh. TOEIC thì khá hơn chút nhưng mà vẫn phải luyện nhiều ha. Các bạn coi tỷ lệ phần trăm số lượng mà các bạn có thể nghe hiểu đó, thì các bạn biết được cái điểm của mình rồi. Okay? So actually in IELTS listening you cannot just use luck. You can't just depend on luck to get a high score, right? You must be able to understand the content. First of all, you need to understand the keywords, the key idea there, and also you need to understand, because I used to hear a lot of students here and most of the students who could get somewhere like 8.5 for listening, they could understand like I think like more than 90% of the text here. Okay, more than 90%. That's how they got 8.5 for listening. So if you want to get a high score, you need to be able to do the same thing. Alright, Ngọc Anh, go.
Maybe we could show a video clip of a cartoon.
Maybe we could show a video clip of a cartoon
About mammoths.
about mammoths.
But that'd be a bit childish.
But that'd be a bit childish.
Or we could have a diagram.
Or we could have a diagram.
It could be a timeline to show
It could be a timeline to show
when they lived, with illustrations.
when they lived with illustrations. So you cannot understand the sentence, but kind of you hear the sound and you kind of repeat similarly, but it's not correct. Okay. So, but that is the answer. Or we could have a diagram. It could be a timeline to show when they lived with illustrations. So that's why the answer here is what? What's the answer here? 21? A, B, or C? Did I tell you the answers for all of them? Yes or no? Yeah? What's that? No, yeah. What? What is the answer for 21? Yeah, give me a sec. 21, B, right? Okay, let me mark it here. And how about 22? So here you see the answer for 21, that is B, with the timeline here. The question, how will Rosie and Martin introduce their presentation? And the answer is with a timeline showing when woolly mammoths lived, right? Because here they say, or we could have a diagram. It could be a timeline to show when they lived with illustrations. Okay, so that's the answer. Got it? Now let's move on and we'll see the answer for the next question. Thi Nga.
Or we could just show a drawing of them
Or we could just show a drawing of them
walking in the ice.
walking in the ice.
No, let's go with your last suggestion.
Yeah, no. Let's go with your last suggestions. Let's go with your last suggestion. That means let's go with the suggestion of having a diagram and kind of it could be a timeline to show when they lived with illustrations. So that is the last suggestion. So that's still the answer. Okay? Go on.
Good. Then you're describing the discovery of the mammoth tooth.
Good. Then you're describing the discovery of the mammoth tooth.
On St. Paul's Island in Alaska.
On St. Paul's Island in Alaska.
And why it was significant.
And why it was significant. Listen again.
Walking in the ice. No, let's go with your last suggestion.
Good. Then you're describing the discovery of the mammoth tooth on St. Paul's Island in Alaska and why it was significant.
Okay, and why it was significant? Significant, what does that mean? Yeah, important. All right. So that's the question. Here they say, what was surprising about the mammoth tooth found by Russell Graham? Right. Now I don't know the answer. A, B, or C. Just listen, and then we'll figure out the answer. Thư.
Yes, the tooth was found by a man.
Yes, cái gì vậy? Không được một cái gì luôn hả? Yes, the tooth was found by a man
Called Russell Graham.
called Russell Graham. Yeah, it just depends on. Yeah, so here that's the name, Russell Graham.
He picked it up from under a rock in a cave.
Yeah, rồi nghe chưa đến 10% luôn. Less than 10%. He picked it up from under a rock in a cave?
He knew it was special.
He knew it was special.
For a start,
For a start, and then they go on it, something.
it was in really good condition.
It was in really good condition.
As if it had been just extracted from
As if it had been just extracted from
the animal's jawbone.
the animal's jawbone.
Anyway, they found it was 6,500 years old.
Anyway, they found it was 6,500 years old. Ok, rồi, Thư vẫn còn rất yếu nha. Chỉ đâu đó khoảng chừng 10 đến 20% thôi. Rất là yếu, cho nên phải luyện nhiều lên. Hương.
So why was that significant?
Trời ơi. So why was that significant?
Well, the mammoth bones previously found on the North American mainland animal's jawbone. Anyway, they found it was 6,500 years old.
So why was that significant?
Well, the mammoth bones previously found
The mammoth bones previously found
on the North American mainland
on the North American mainland
were much less recent than that.
were much less recent than that.
So this was really amazing.
So this was really amazing. And that is the answer. The mammoth bones previously found on the North American mainland were much less recent than that. That is the answer for number 22. So, A, B, or C, guys? 22C, right? It was... What was surprising about the mammoth tooth found by Russell Graham? We can say Graham, but they say Graham. Yeah, okay. Whatever. It was not as old as mammoth remains from elsewhere. Okay? What does that mean? It was not as old as mammoth remains from elsewhere. Remains, what does that mean? You don't know, guys? So remains here means something left from maybe something like an animal or something after a certain amount of time. Normally we use this one to talk about something which is left from a particular object after a very, very long time. Okay? So here it was not as old as mammoth remains. So whatever left from a mammoth from a long, long time ago from somewhere else. Okay, here they say from elsewhere. So that's why in the Rosie said, well, the mammoth bones previously found on the North American mainland were much less recent than that. So this was really amazing. So that's why that's the answer. Alright, now let's continue. Rồi, bạn Hương cũng cỡ bằng Thư ha. Rồi đó khoảng chừng 20 to 30%, not more. Huy.
Then we're making an animated diagram.
Then we're making an animated diagram.
To show the geography of the area.
To show the geography of the area.
In prehistoric times.
In prehistoric times.
So originally,
So originally,
St. Paul's Island wasn't an island.
Suppose island wasn't an island.
It was connected to the mainland.
It was connected to the mainland.
And mammoths and other animals, like bears,
And mammoths and other animals like bears
were able to roam around the whole area.
were able to roam around the whole area. Yeah, somewhere like 30% to 40%. Okay, somewhere like 30%. Rồi đa phần các bạn nghe đâu đó khoảng chừng có bạn thì 10, 20%, 20, 30%, 30, 40% ha. Cho nên cái band của bạn đâu đó sẽ đâu đó khoảng chừng band 4 thôi. 4.5. Tức là thực lực đó bạn, còn lại thì ví dụ lâu lâu mình đánh được thì có thể là ABC, có cái xác suất may rủi nó cộng vô thì các bạn có thể khá hơn chút. Nhưng mà khi mà lên cái level cao, cái band cao hơn thì mấy cái luck này không có tác dụng này đâu nha. Alright, let's continue. Nhi.
Then the climate warmed up.
Yeah, then the climate warmed up.
And the sea level began to rise.
And the sea level began to rise.
And the island got cut off from the mainland.
And the island got cut off from the mainland.
So those mammoths on the island
So those mammoths on the island
couldn't escape.
couldn't escape.
They had to stay on the island.
They had to stay on the island. Okay, so that is the answer. So those mammoths on the island couldn't escape. They had to stay on the island. And have a look at the question again. 23, the students will use an animated diagram to demonstrate how the mammoths. And what's the answer for number 23, guys? A, right? Yeah. So for those of you who don't have the answer, yeah, please check. Okay, became isolated on the island. The students will use an animated diagram to demonstrate how the mammoths became isolated on the island. And here they say those mammoths on the island couldn't escape, so they had to stay on the island. They had to stay on the island means what? They had to stay on the island means? Yes, that means they became isolated on the island. Okay? I mean they couldn't get in or out. Nothing can get in or get out. Yeah? Alright, 24, according to Mann, what is unusual about the date of the mammoth's extinction on the island? A, B, or C? Well, we'll see. Doing.
And in fact,
yeah, and in fact,
the species survived there for thousands of years.
The species survived there for thousands of years.
After they'd become extinct on the mainland.
After they become extinct on the mainland.
So, why do you think they died out on the mainland?
So why do you think they die out on the mainland?
No one's sure.
No one's sure.
Anyway, next we'll explain how Graham and his team.
Anyway, yeah, listen again.
So, why do you think they died out on the mainland?
No one's sure.
Anyway, next we'll explain how Graham and his team identified the date when...
Anyway, next we'll explain how Graham and his team identified the date
the mammoths became extinct on the island.
Yeah, when the mammoths became extinct on the island. Ngọc Anh.
They concluded that
they concluded that
the extinction happened 5,600 years ago.
Okay, again.
Next, we'll explain how Graham and his team identified the date when the mammoths became extinct on the island. They concluded that the extinction happened 5,600 years ago.
Yeah, try to listen to this because this is the answer. They concluded that the extinction happened 5,600 years ago.
Which is a very precise time for a prehistoric extinction.
Which is a very precise time for a prehistoric extinction. So this is the answer. They conclude that the extinction happened 5,600 years ago, which is a very precise time for a prehistoric extinction. Have a look at the question again. According to Martin, what is unusual about the date of the mammoth extinction on the island? Okay, so the answer is what? 24A, yeah? 24A. How exact it is. That means very precise. Okay? And here they say what? They say that the extinction happened 5,600 years ago, which is a very precise time for a prehistoric extinction. Okay? And here they say how exact it is. So very precise. So that's why the answer is A. Okay? Go on.
It's based on samples they took from mud.
It's based on samples they took from mud.
At the bottom of a lake on the island.
At the bottom of a lake on the island. Thì nghe.
They analysed it.
Yeah, they analyzed it.
To find out what had fallen in over time.
To find out what had fallen in over time.
Bits of plants.
Bits of plants.
Volcanic ash. And even DNA from the mammoths themselves.
Volcanic ash, and even DNA from the mammoths themselves.
It's standard procedure.
It's standard procedure.
But it took nearly 2 years to do.
Yeah, but it took nearly 2 years to do. All right. So that's for the first part of section 3. So section 3, yeah. Now we move on to the next part of that one. So choose 6 answers from the box and write the correct letter A to H next to questions 25 to 30. Here we have a list of actions, and also we have the sections of presentation. For example, like number 25, introduction, what should we put there? Okay.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Okay, Thư.
So why don't you quickly go through the main sections of
So why don't you quickly go through the main sections
your presentation
of your presentation
and discuss what actions needed for each part?
and discuss what actions needed for each part.
Okay, so for the introduction,
Okay, so for the introduction,
we're using a visual.
we're using a visual.
So once we prepared that, we're done.
So once we prepare that, we're done.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
I think we need to write down all the ideas we want to include here.
I think we need to write down all the ideas we want to include here.
Not just rely on memory.
Not just rely on memory. So that's the answer. But you couldn't hear that. So did you get it correctly in your real exam? 25? What is the answer for number 25, guys? E, right? 25E. Introduction, here, make detailed notes. Yeah? Because here they say, I think we need to write down all the ideas we want to include here. So it makes sense with what? Makes sense with make detailed notes. So the answer is A. Got it? Alright. Next one. Hơn.
How we begin the presentation is so important.
How we begin the presentation is so important.
You're right.
You're right.
The discovery of the mammoth tooth
The discovery of the mammoth tooth
is probably the most dramatic part.
is probably the most dramatic part.
But we don't have that much information.
But we don't have that much information.
Only what we got from the online article.
Only what we got from the online article. Alright, listen to this. This is the answer.
I thought maybe we
Yeah, I thought maybe we
could get in touch with the researcher who
could get in touch with the researcher who
led the team
led the team, not left the team,
and ask him to tell us a bit more.
and ask him to tell us a little bit more. Again, I thought maybe we could get in touch with the researcher who led the team and ask him to tell us a bit more. So that is the answer for number 26. So what's that, guys? D, right? We can fix that there. So discovery of the mammoth tooth. The answer is D. Contact one of the researchers. So it makes sense, right? Here they say we could get in touch with the researcher who led the team and ask him to tell us a bit more. Huy.
Great idea.
Yeah, great idea.
What about the section with the initial questions?
What about the section with the initial questions
Asked by the researchers.
asked by the researchers?
We've got a lot on that.
We've got a lot on that.
But we need to make it interesting.
But we need to make it interesting.
We could ask the audience to
Yeah, we could ask the audience to
suggest some questions about
suggest some questions about
it, and then see how many of them we can answer.
about it, and then see how many of them we can answer.
I don't think it would take too long.
I don't think it would take too long. So that's the answer, guys. We could ask the audience to suggest some questions about it, and then see how many of them we can answer. And here they say initial questions asked by the researchers. So what's the answer for number 27, guys? What? A. Okay. Yeah. A, make it more interactive. More interactive, what does that mean? Why do they say that initial questions asked by the researchers make it more interactive? What does that mean? How can you explain that? No. Who? Who can explain this? Make it more interactive. What does that mean? When we say make it more interactive, that means that we make it like Q&A. Okay, so like everyone can join, everyone can chime in and then ask some questions, and someone else will answer the questions. So that means that make it more interactive. Interactive, I mean the action, the connection. Okay, like someone keeps asking some questions, and these two students can answer the questions. Yeah. So that's why here they say we could ask the audience to suggest some questions about it, and then see how many of them we can answer. I mean, they can make it more interactive. Okay. All right, Nhi.
Yes, that would add a bit of variety.
Yes, that would add a bit of variety.
Then the section on further research.
Then the section on further research.
Carried out on the island.
Carried out on the island.
Analysing the mud in the lake.
Analysing the mud in the lake.
I wonder if we've actually got too much information here.
I wonder if we actually got too much information here.
Should we cut some?
Yeah, should we cut some?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
But it's all a bit muddled at present.
But it's all a bit muddled at present. Muddle, what does that mean? It's all a bit muddled at present. What does that mean? Muddle means kind of messy. Okay? Yeah. Later on you can check that. Yeah? If you don't know how to write it. Alright. Doing. Listen to this carefully because here, this is the answer.
Yes, maybe it would be better if it...
Yes, maybe it would be better if
followed a chronological pattern.
it followed a chronological pattern. Chronological pattern. Yes, maybe it would be better if it followed a chronological pattern. What does that mean? Chronological pattern, what does that mean? Chronological, we are talking about kind of the order in terms of time, okay? Yeah. And pattern, you know, do you understand pattern? Kind of the standard, like the procedure or process. So it follow a chronological pattern. That means it's follow kind of a sample or standard, and it just go from time to time, okay, in the correct order, in the correct time order, okay, theo thứ tự thời gian bạn, theo mô hình thời gian. All right. So what is the answer for this one? Further research carried out on the island. What is the answer for number 28? That's H. Yeah, H. Organize the content more clearly. Yeah, organize the content more clearly. So here they plan to use what? The chronological pattern. That means that they put everything in kind of the right order related to time. Okay, like 1,000 years ago or 100 years ago, and then go up to the most recent time. Now go on. Ngọc Anh.
I think so. The findings and possible explanations section
I think so. The findings and possible explanation section.
is just about ready.
Yeah, it's just about ready.
But we need to practice it, so
But we need to practice it. So
we're sure it won't overrun.
we're sure it won't overrun. And here's the answer, okay? I think so. The findings and possible explanation section is just about ready. But we need to practice it, so we're sure it won't overrun. And let's have a look at the question here. Findings and possible explanations. What's the answer for number 29, guys? G. The answer for number 29, G. And I check timing. Check timing. And here they say what? They say we need to practice it, so we sure it won't overrun. Overrun, what does that mean? It won't overrun. Overrun here, that means that you use more time than permitted. Okay, that means overrun. I mean that they are afraid that they may use, that they cannot work quickly enough, and then they may overrun. I mean they need to spend more time on that one. For example, like the presentation, they're only allowed to do it for like 20 minutes, but they need to use like 40 minutes or something. So that means it overrun. Got it? I mean that surpass the time limit. Okay. Now, who's next? Thiên Nga, right? Okay, let's go.
I think it should be okay.
Yeah, I think it should be okay.
But yes, let's make sure.
Yeah, but yes, let's make sure.
In the last section,
In the last section,
relevance to the present day,
relevance to the present day,
you've got some good ideas, but
You've got some good ideas, but
this is where you need to move away from the ideas of
this is where you need to move away from the ideas of
others and give your own viewpoint.
Okay, listen again.
Section, relevance to the present day. You've got some good ideas, but this is where you need to move away from the ideas of others and give your own viewpoint.
But this is where you need to move away from the ideas of others and give your own viewpoint. What does that mean? Move away from the ideas of others. What does that mean? Guys, tell me, what does that mean? You need to move away from the ideas of others and give your own viewpoint. What does that mean? It means that you don't you move away from the ideas of others. That means that you don't just listen to the opinions or ideas of someone else. Okay, now it's time for what? You need to give your own viewpoint. That means you need to give your own ideas or your own opinions. Okay, and that is the answer for number 30, guys. Number 30 here, they say relevance to the present day. What is the answer for that? 30? C, right? You can write C there. C, add personal opinions. See that? You need to add personal opinions, means that you need to give your own viewpoint. Okay? Alright, I think just last one. Go.
Okay, we'll think about that.
Okay, we'll think about that.
Now, shall we?
Yeah, now shall we blah blah something? Yeah. So we have just listened to the entire section 3 again, and I hope that you got some idea about your listening skills at the moment, and also you get more, you understand more why we need to answer those questions like that. So now you can have a look at you can check all the answers again to see that whether you understand everything completely or not. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. All right. All right, guys, you can have a look at the script. Open it. And if you have any questions, anything you don't understand, just ask. And I'm going to explain everything. Which page is that? What? 104. 104. Okay, just open it. Huh? What? Oh. Oh, not here. Anything. You need to pay attention on the answers, okay? All the sentences which are underlined, so those are the answers, and you need to check them carefully.